So welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome to our what will be our third annual Gather Around Local Food event. Today's been a day of online talks and video content where we've been hearing about the value local food can add to different parts of our lives. I'm Stuart Gajinski. I'm here with my colleague Steffi, and we're from Forth Environment Link. FEL's Regional Food Hubs project supports organisations in rural parts of Scotland to deliver click and collect markets for local food. We're funded by Leader in Perth and Kinross, Fife, Scottish Borders and the Forth Valley and Lomond. If you like today's session, please follow Forth Environment Link's social media for news of more events from us and different teams and other climate actions as well. And before I introduce our speakers this evening, I just want to remind you that this session is being recorded and you can catch it again on FEL's YouTube channel, where you can also find sessions from last year's event if they're interesting to you. FEL has been partnering with NeighbourFood, an online farmers market platform, to make it easier to build local food networks and connect producers and customers directly. Now, I say customers and not consumers because every week more people are choosing online markets as a way of really engaging with their food and those who produce it. By changing the way they shop in line with their values, they become, what I'd argue, are food citizens. Food citizenship is a movement away from being passive consumers and towards helping shape our food system that works for our communities, our health, our planet, and our sheer enjoyment and pleasure in food. So I'm delighted to say we have 4 speakers this evening with very different perspectives. We're delighted to be joined firstly by Lyndsay Cochrane of the Slow Food Youth Network in Scotland, who'll share how the movement is creating a better future through good, clean and fair food in Scotland and beyond. Hopefully we'll be joined shortly by Marysia Peszkowska, who is executive chef at Monachal Moor in Stirlingshire and a graduate of the Wild Wonders foraging programme. We'll share some of her adventures finding free food from the wilds of Scotland. And Miesbeth Knottenbelt, from Nourish Scotland, who will share thoughts from her recent work partnering with both FEL and Edinburgh Community Food to better understand how to overcome the barriers to local food in some cases in more deprived communities. To kick us off, we're delighted to be joined by Jack Crotty, co-founder of NeighbourFood, and to say a few words. And just to remind you that we'll have a Q&A session at the end, so please do feel free to use the chat box throughout to tell us who you are, what your comment or question is, and at the end of the presentations we'll have time to pick up on any other thoughts if you want to put your hand up. So Jack, I'm going to hand straight over to you for a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Stuart. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Very much honoured. I was lucky enough today to be able to sit in on pretty much all the chats that we had, that you were having there, and really exciting. I mean, we work in a couple of different areas. Scotland is actually where we started, in spite of being from Cork. I'm not going to be talking for too long tonight because there's so many here, but Stuart has very much been the link that has made that happen. And I suppose a good opportunity to thank everybody in Forth Environment Link and Stuart, Steffi and Em, who I've been chatting to, because it's amazing to have that type of help and to have those eyes and ears on the ground and always at the end of a phone if there's something that we need a little bit of help with. So thank you guys for all of that. I suppose many people who might be listening to this here now and who may watch this in the future may already know what NeighbourFood is, so I don't need to explain too much about that, but I might just quickly kind of talk, I suppose, about where do we go from here, because as we all know, the idea, well, from my point of view, the idea for NeighbourFood was that I wanted to do something like this as a host. I didn't want to set up this platform originally, but when I realized that I couldn't find any software that would come to Little Ireland and wasn't interested in the market there, and I think they made a terrible mistake in that, by the way. I decided that I would try and find someone to do it with me, and I managed to inspire someone, and we built it together, and it evolved and became something, you know, that is very different in many ways to anything that's out there aside of that. And then we started in Scotland, and COVID has very much changed what we imagined this would be. So for myself and Martin, it was completely full-time crazy experience for the last year, and we saw the power that that was given to small producers to be able to be dynamic and to be able to work with their communities. And I know that the customers that we gathered along the way, although they might drift in and out due to the summer and reopenings and different things, we have fed people who were not used to eating local food, which was my main drive and hope for this, was that instead of just bringing people from a farm shop or from a farmer's market, they're going to continue with those places. We have taken people who didn't know that this food existed and that may not have been used to eating real food and are now not going to be able to go back, I believe. So to quickly summarize what we're doing now is we're very much able to and hoping that we'll be able to resource ourselves well. So we have a producer liaison, we have someone who helps us with social media, we have a content creator, we're working on a podcast that we're going to release in September. We have loads of different things in the pipeline to be able to further explore the network we have. But ultimately, at the base of everything, what we've always said is, let's just keep listening to producers and provide them with tools and what they need to be able to do. Our main pieces of feedback was that people would love a tool to deal with their wholesale ordering. And Stuart also kind of tipped us with this and said that this would be really useful. So this is what we're working on the most at the moment. So being able to have something that a producer, a food seller can use to manage all their wholesale orders. And that'll be kind of almost like a new thing really, but within the same network, and will be provided to producers at like the most affordable possible thing that we can do. It'll not be commission based. It'll just be a very small fee to keep the service running, with the idea that the more we support the producers in our network, the more they'll be interested in working within NeighbourFood. So that's one step. The next step then is that we have an idea for a loyalty scheme. And another thing that Stuart very much helped with is saying, don't bother giving percentages here and there to customers. They care about other things way more than they do discounts. And he's absolutely right. So we're going to try and figure out a way where our loyalty scheme can funnel money back into the communities. And it's a complicated thing, so I won't get into that either. But basically, at some point in autumn, we'll hopefully be able to release a loyalty scheme where you can see that the more you shop on NeighbourFood, the more it supports a growing project just down the road from you, or even like sorting out a dirty roundabout and planting some vegetables, or whatever the case may be. There'll be a way for you to funnel some money into those things. Yeah, and then finally, in response to the chat that happened at lunchtime today, which I found fascinating, the idea of, and I've always said this as well, that the local food producers, as we evolve, your product is one thing, but your experience and your skills that you have are very much another. And I think that there's a great opportunity for producers, and myself coming from being a producer myself at farmers markets, we always did events, we always did different ways, and people are so quick to do those things, and they really want to learn, and they want to do workshops, or they want to do experiences, and we'd love to try and make that simple for people too. So in the same with the wholesale, we'll create a functionality where people can create their own events, and that's not going to be like a revenue hunt from our point of view. It's going to be another thing that's integrated into the NeighbourFood kind of experience that customers can also book in for a workshop or a farm visit or something, and that a baker doesn't just focus on sending their 50 or their 100 loaves out every day, but that they can actually teach people how to make bread, and that they can once a month do a class, which could just be an amazing way to really kind of grow your business without sacrificing that quality versus quantity with. So at that point, I suppose I'll leave all other people who probably have amazing things to say them.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for those. Some of those are exclusives. You heard them here first, so thank you very much. Right, I'm going to hand straight over to Lyndsay Cochrane of Slow Food Youth Network, who I'm going to leave to introduce herself and her organisation, because she'll do it far better than I will. Lyndsay.
Thanks very much, Stuart. So I have a presentation to hopefully share. Let's see if this works. Okay. So as Stuart said, my name is Lyndsay Cochrane. And I am a co-coordinator of Spin Scotland, along with Rebecca, who's also here, and Lucy, who I think has just appeared too. Sorry, I just realised I've lost this. Yeah. Oh, there we go. That's lost the screen share, isn't it? Sorry about that. It's my talk's on another thing. I'll just crack on, not take up too much time. Yes, so we, the three of us come from very varied backgrounds. So myself, my day job is with Scotland Abroad. I do the kind of community outreach projects with them. That's around kind of bread making and grain growing. We were really delighted to be working with Forth Environment Link on that quite recently as well. Lucy is a freelance graphic designer, and she is currently working with Glasgow Wood Recycling and their work there, and she's got really strong enthusiasm for zero waste cooking. So that's one of the kind of passions that brought her into Spin Scotland. And Rebecca is actually Italian, and she's from the home of slow food in Turin itself, and is studying for an MSc in Environment and Development in Edinburgh. So that's just a little bit about us as the group that's currently kind of working in Slow Food Youth Network Scotland. As a kind of introduction to slow food in general, which is the overarching movement that the Youth Network is part of. You might have heard of it already, but for those who haven't, it's a global grassroots organisation. It was founded in the 1980s to prevent the disappearance of local food cultures and traditions, to counteract the rise of fast life mainly, and to combat people's dwindling interest in the food that they eat and where it comes from. So since its beginnings, it's grown into a global movement out of Italy, and it involves millions of people in over 160 countries, all working to ensure that everyone has access to good, clean and fair food. There's a belief that food is tied to many other aspects of life, which includes culture, politics, agriculture and the environment. Through our food choices, we can collectively influence how food is cultivated, produced, distributed, and we can hopefully change the world as a result. There are different topics and campaigns within slow food, and that kind of captures obviously the different interests that people have in different places of the food system, and all the food issues that mean something to them. So this, some of the different campaigns that are involved are slow food travel, which ties, I think, into what you were speaking about this afternoon. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it along. There's slow cheese, which actually has its own festival every 2 years in northeast Italy, unbelievable. And slow bees, obviously, to capture people's interest and do some campaigns around, you know, the very important aspect of protecting bees and obviously biodiversity alongside that. And there's obviously campaigns around slow grains and slow fish, you know, the list goes on really. There's also varied networks and projects within slow food as well. These include earth markets, where the protagonists are really the small local producers. There's an Arc of Taste, which is about protecting endangered local food and food traditions. So there are different foods from Scotland which are included within that, such as berrymeal and Aberdeen butteries, interestingly enough. There's also a Chef Alliance, which champions those chefs who are really focusing on promoting good, clean and fair food within what they do, perhaps just within serving in the restaurant, and maybe they open up events as well for other people. And there's another network as well called Terra Madre Indigenous, which brings Indigenous people's voices to the fore and shares their valuable knowledge around the food system as well. So that's slow food as a beginning. And then the Slow Food Youth Network, which I'll call SFIN for short, was launched in 2007 and is a branch of slow food which unites young food enthusiasts, chefs, activists, students, food producers, anyone really, to participate in events and activities on important food related issues, and stimulates young people to take positive action in the food system as well. They're doing really varied things really all across the world. There's big groups of small groups. In the UK, actually, we are the only group, the only SFIN group in Scotland. So, you know, the various activities that they're doing, in SFIN Netherlands, they created an academy which is designed to educate young change makers on the current food system, the challenges of that current food system, as well as inspiring them and providing the skills to tackle these challenges as well. So it's really quite a large structure, a large project that they've got going on, and it's been replicated in other countries such as Germany and Brazil as well. There's also a podcast series by Spin International, in that they interview food activists, producers, again, anyone really to do with the food system on particular topics from across the world on the work that they do around a good, clean and fair food system. And then there's the kind of trademark Spin event, which is called a disco soup. And that aims to make a kind of bold statement about food waste, and involves people coming together to chop, to cook and share a giant soup made from vegetables destined to go to landfill. And all the time that that's happening, there's great music in the background, people dancing around the table, hopefully not with knives. And doing, an event like that brings a sense of fun and a bit of companionship to an important topic, which might otherwise seem a bit dry. And that way it makes it possible to reach more people with the key messages that everyone's tiny actions or small actions, when they're put together, they can create something incredibly powerful. And that kind of ties into one of the Spin mottos, which is, we don't need giants because we are millions. So Spin in Scotland, as we're sort of part of, that's originally set up in 2015 by a girl called Gillian Rogers, and she worked with an amazing group of young volunteers to take up the network from strength to strength. They set it up as a community interest company, which helped it gain a bit more structure and a lot more ability to expand, really. It did go dormant for a little while, but in the last few months, really, Rebecca, Lucy and I sort of came across that, and we thought we'd do some work to revive it again and try and bring it back to where it was, really. As examples of previous activities that Spin Scotland has done was World Disco Soup Days, again, sort of quite an easy one to organise if you've got the space, and some waste food. They also created a seasonal culinary calendar, which included some of the special Scottish vegetables and fruit which are in the Ark of Taste, that people might not have come across and might not know really when they're grown or how to use them. That was all included in there with some recipes. And they also did a What the Food campaign, involving a series of events to provide insight into how food is grown, processed, sold, distributed and eaten, in order to inspire people to ask questions about the current food system and to think again about what they would like it to look like in the future and how to get there, really. So as I say, we've kind of just come on board, which actually feels like a very exciting point in time, because we can look back at what's been done and also start to engage with a lot of new young people, bringing them into the network, hopefully, and sort of helping us and letting us know what issues they're passionate about, letting us know what they want from the network, what do they feel is particularly important in the Scottish context, events that they'd like to hold and campaigns that they'd like to see run. So we're really, really open to ideas at the moment. We had an open call yesterday and we heard some ideas ranging from having obviously a disco soup ahead of the COP26, covering that issue about food waste, just ahead of the climate talks. Having smaller gatherings in cities, which would hopefully help get around any sort of COVID regulations. Talking about local food feasts, which I guess covers quite a lot of what you were talking about earlier today as well, and about neighbourhood is making sure that people know what is local to them, and really having a celebration of that as well. And looking to engage with universities, because obviously a lot of them have sustainability societies, cooking societies. So we want to engage with these people and then see how they are engaging with their fellow students as well, to kind of get more of the messages out there, and looking at different campaigns, because we know that a lot of young people have very strong opinions about different campaigns. We'd really like to make sure that they have the platform through us and with us to get their voices heard. And kind of related to that, we are part of the Scottish Food Coalition. And so I know that there's work been done and being done on the Good Food Nation bill. And again, we're just kind of coming into that, but we were really excited to see if there's ways of encouraging young people to make sure that their voices are heard by those empowered by engaging with this Good Food Nation bill. So apologies that my presentation worked and then didn't work, but I will put all of our details into the chat, and that way you can get in touch with us. As I say, we'd really love to hear from you, from people in your network, young people you know, just send them our way. It'd be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lyndsay. That's wow. There's a lot there. There's a lot to run through. But yeah, do share your links so people can pick up and follow what you're doing and engage with you. That's fantastic. Wow, a lot there. So we're gonna move on to something really quite different now, and that's with again, I won't preempt it. Mies, you'll be able to describe it and introduce it much better than I can. But we're going to move on to Mies from Nourish now, who's going to discuss some work she's been doing recently in partnership with FEL and other partners as well.
Great, thanks, Stuart. Can think of your name there. So I'll keep it short because I think we'll want some time to discuss things as well. But picking up on this thing about what we can do to widen the number of people, the type of people that access local food, we devised a little project to try and see what the challenges are for families, normal families. We know, for example, that in the pandemic, there was a lot of uptake of box schemes, but we also know that that was a very niche thing still. And so the question is, we also know that it was mostly higher and middle income people, and that low income people generally weren't tapping into this. So we thought we'd have a project to see if we remove the costs of this food, if we gave families boxes for free, what other challenges are there alongside cost challenges? So I'll share my screen and have a couple of slides and I'll go for that. Hang on. First, I have to do the share screen button. Right, there we go. Share. Can you see that? Yeah. So it was a project between Nourish that I work for and Forth Environment Link and Edinburgh Community Food, who are two partners in the community that recruited families for us, and we called it the Local Food Champions Project. Wait a minute, that's not moving. How is that not moving? Yeah, there we are. So what we did was we delivered boxes of local seasonal veg and some store covered items as well that they needed to make the most of that veg to 28 low income households in Edinburgh and one in the Central Belt. And we did that for free for 10 weeks. And we had quite a lot of support online, a Facebook group, dedicated Mighty network thing, and some fortnightly workshops where people exchanged recipes and discussed how to make the most of their veg. And we also had some wider topics about where the food comes from and, you know, what is sustainable food and how is it more or less sustainable and that kind of thing, or anything that people wanted to talk about. And we also followed families up with surveys and interviews so that we could tap into what they were making of it, how they were experiencing this kind of thing. So really the objective of the whole thing was to find out what the challenges were for people. And what did we find? Well, they really felt treated. Mostly, they really liked it. Treated because they felt like they couldn't normally get this stuff and it tasted great. And they felt privileged to be part of that sort of network. And the network thing was really important to them. So being part of that group and sharing experiences, I think it was a pandemic thing, you know, there's a lot of isolation going on. And that really was fun for people to be part of that kind of network. And the funders were also people that cared about that. You know, the whole project was to expand networks and to build community kind of thing. So that in that sense, it was really good. But also people felt like they were doing the right thing. You know, they were eating healthily, they were cooking a wider variety of food. And some people really liked it because they could involve their kids in the cooking, which was one of their things that they really wanted to do. And generally people felt like they learned more about food. They had the curiosity and they got new things out of it. So they really liked learning about where food comes from and the way that we had in the sessions. But also just to learn new recipes, and there was a lot of sharing of this online. And for some people, it turned into extending their community work. Like there was a Muslim Rainbow Women group that started batch cooking curries for their neighbors, and it really took off in some places. But we need to recognize that there were lots of challenges as well. A lot of the people that participated didn't have any previous experience of the kind of food that comes in these boxes. And they didn't sometimes recognize what to do with it. They found it really hard to know how to handle it. There was a lot of talk about what do you chop off, and when is it off, and how do you peel it, and how do you wash it, and where do you store it, and there was basics of cooking, like when do you start, add stuff to the oil, or when different ingredients come, and when is it done, and that kind of really basic stuff. There was a lot of talk about that, and a lot of hints and tips about all these things, sell-by dates, and what, these boxes don't come with sell-by dates of different stuff, and it looks all kind of like, what is this thing? What do I do with it? It was quite funny how it was quite, people enjoyed talking about this, but it was also a bit stressful for some families. And the other stressful thing was that they couldn't always convince the rest of the household to participate in this. So, a teenager would pull their nose up at these things, or there's a lot of talk about fussy eaters, and making all that effort and then having nobody eating it is quite disheartening, I think. And then, of course, there was all the same winter varieties, like, cabbage 3 times in a row, or beetroot, or, what do you do with all this stuff? And the freezers are not big enough, and so on. And some of these challenges we recognized, we talk about this within Nourish, we are quite committed to this kind of thing, but we still find it quite hard to cook kale every week, and then what to do with all this cabbage and stuff. Very basic, what to make of this box of food that comes to you where you've had no choice because it's seasonal, and to make the most of it takes a lot of energy, and for some of these families there just wasn't the additional time and energy to put into that. And then there were also other challenges about kids needing taken care of. A lot of them were young families, and there's a lot of competing pressures on their time. And for some, those missing equipment, like tiny freezers or no blenders or sharp knives, or even where to store this big awkward looking box in these tiny kitchens, there were just real pressures for people. And then, of course, the support we offered had to be all online, and that's also, I think, not to be underestimated, how hard it is for some families, especially poor families, to have a device that they can access online support with. Missing cables and no privacy and all that stuff is very real. And also not feeling up to it. Some families just weren't coping very well, and mental ill health or recent trauma or just extreme poverty can really get in the way to making this extra effort to engage with doing this food in different ways. So in some ways, it raised more questions than we thought there would be. I think partly in the surveys we did, it became quite clear that normally how people do food, they reported to us, is they go to the supermarket and they get clean stuff that's labeled and dated, and it often has cooking instructions. And of course, they told us, most of the food is already half prepared or all prepared. They eat a lot of takeaways. They buy often frozen food because it's cheaper for them. What they don't do very often is raw ingredients, which is what we were asking them to make the most of. So we were asking, it became quite clear early on that we were asking quite a lot of them, because effectively we were kind of completely changing their diet by asking them to eat all this stuff every week that they didn't normally come across. So I think in the end, for us, it was about if you're thinking about how you widen this range of people that do local seasonal food in those ways, then you're thinking about how you make it easier for them. You know, how can you lower the thresholds? Because actually there are a lot of thresholds in the way. So putting more support in place is one thing, and then it needs to be reliable and long term. Like there's a real issue about giving people free food and then taking it away from them, or any of that support that we were giving to them. Support might be, you know, lists of recipes and labels on the stuff that's in these boxes, all that kind of stuff. And also the realization that until you address all these challenges, even if there's one challenge left, you can't really expect positive results. You know, it's really got to be addressed properly. And then the other issue I think is a big one, is about autonomy and choice. You know, following their suggestions about what kinds of food they would actually like to be substituted, rather than give them a whole box of stuff they never really eat much of. And at what pace they want it introduced. So even if if the families all eat potatoes, maybe they do, maybe you want to substitute 1 week potatoes for a better potato and have a conversation about what a more sustainable potato might be, you know, something like that, gradually and according to their choices and in line with what they already do. There were a lot of questions about how you make local seasonal food easier, I think. And then especially if you bear in mind people's limited skills, and energy and time, which are real constraints. So how then do we make, if this is what it's about, these foods more convenient? They need to come in familiar and convenient forms. Maybe the producers can do a bit more washing. If that's what's stopping people from, you know, the extra time and knowing when you wash it and how you wash it, that's a really simple thing. Maybe there's something about portions as well. You know, large cabbages for small families 2 weeks in a row is just not what supermarkets do anyway. There's something in, you know, avoiding wasting food and suitable portions and tailored portions, or choice of portions, you know, the amounts. And maybe some of it needs to be, you know, can we do some preparation? Can we freeze stuff to make it cheaper and to make it more in line with what people normally buy? And certainly about availability, you know, convenience stores in most of the small Scottish towns, none of this stuff is available, or at least very little is available. And the only way people can access it is by going online, which is a really easy thing to do for some families, but for others, it's just not a thing they do at all. So what did we learn? I think, to sum up, there's a lot of potential in this for community building, for people doing stuff like this together, for strengthening communities. Any food project, arguably, food is social glue in that sense, and where people are happy, where the food is happy, the glue is happy, if you like, there is more interconnection and community building, which is so valuable. There were lots of challenging aspects to this, and we realized that we were putting all the onus on the people that were participating in this, rather than, and we think there's a lot of scope for us at the suppliers end, making things a lot easier for people, especially if they have limited time and resources. So I think we realize there's a long way to go in mainstreaming these local foods. If we see local food as a thing that everybody should be doing, generating local jobs, you know, reducing food miles self-sufficiently, and all the better technologies that tend to be kinder on the environment and on animals and all that, all the good things about local food. If we want to mainstream it, there's a long way to go, and we need to consider some of this stuff that we've just talked about. But mostly, I think we were also reminded all the way through this project, despite, you know, you get busy and there's deadlines and you forget about these things. But if you do things with people rather than to people, that always goes further. I think that's mainly, you know, asking people what they actually want and listening to them is kind of the main message, I think, of this project. Although we learned a lot and we're having very interesting discussions about it. I'll stop there. There'll be lots of things to discuss.
Thank you, Mies. Yeah, really fascinating project to have worked with you on. And I know also, I don't know if you want to maybe drop a link to your blog in the chat, because if you're interested in knowing a little bit more, Mies has written up a blog on the project as well. But yeah,
it's already in the chat, but maybe you have to scroll up because it was one of the first messages. Yeah,
fantastic. Thank you, Mies. So two really interesting perspectives there, and we were hoping to be joined by a third main speaker, Marisha from Monacar Moor, who was one of the cohorts on, I think it was the 2019, luckily not 2020, but 2019 Wild Wonders foraging course funded by Forth Valley and Lomond Leader, to share some of her experience of both using free food from the wild, both in her family life and her professional life as well. But unfortunately, it seems like she's not been able to join us. But if you do want to have a look at, I can drop a link in actually of a link to the Wild Wonders course, so you can have a bit of an idea around it. But I don't know if there's any foragers in the group today who want to kind of add that perspective of how to take agency really over our food system and take a bit more active control about how we build our food system, what goes onto our plates. But certainly two really interesting perspectives, and I'm going to throw this open to questions now, and or thoughts or comments or experiences. So anybody want to? Oh, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop recording. So I know some people can feel a bit self-conscious asking a question. So I'm going to stop recording, and then we can have a nice free chat